CrowdStrike stops breaches. These days, critical work isn't done from the protection of a corporate network. It happens at cafes, back offices, and at home. New ways of working mean new attacks. New attacks require new defenses. CrowdStrike stops breaches so you can do what you do best. CrowdStrike, we stop so you can go. CrowdStrike is offering Security Weekly listeners 15 days free access to its platform. See how it works at securityweekly.com/CrowdStrike. The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM. Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. B-Sides Boston is back in action for their 10-year anniversary. The conference will be virtually held on Saturday, September 26th. Tickets are only $10. You can get yours at bsidesbos.org. Some of the Security Weekly team will have our own channel in the B-Sides Boston Discord server, answering questions and possibly doing some contests. No stranger to the show, Ferruh Mavituna is the CEO and founder of NetSparker and joins us today to talk about the current needs of modern enterprises with respects to web application security. Ferruh, welcome to the show.
Hey, Paul. Thank you for having me again. It's nice to be back.
Yes, nice to have you again, as always. Ferruh, one of the things that you were just actually mentioning in the break that I have a question about is if I am responsible for security in a large enterprise and I want to do the discovery phase to know what I have, how do I know where to look if I don't know what I have, right? How does NetSparker enable me to find things that I don't know about? I can't even tell NetSparker sometimes where to look, maybe, right? Because I don't know that those exist. So how do you start on that journey of discovery?
Yeah. I mean, in NetSparker, it's pretty straightforward, to be honest. You just kind of, if you already onboarded some websites, we kind of use them as a seed to look for, same domain, same owners, same certificates, all that like general, OSINT approach.
Mm-hmm.
If you haven't even onboarded your website, you can say, hey, these are my brands, this is what I have, and you can kind of then further filter down who you are or who you are not. So we are not like getting to, I am X and I don't want to see XY kind of situation.
Mm-hmm.
But that's very straightforward. And that's like, kind of, as you touch the bigger topic, that's like your first step into, into web application security as an enterprise. Like, let's first figure out what we have so we can start securing it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, so basically it would crawl and say, hey, you told me to scan this website, but in the process, NetSparker will discover those through certificate chains, through, hot linking on the website and things of that nature, right?
So actually, when it comes to discovery, I mean, we utilize all of that, but the main utilization is around two key things, which is one of the internet scan data. So just like all the host names, etc., whatever is publicly available. Mm-hmm. The other key piece information is SSL certificate data. Again, what we do with a bunch of other crawl data, we update that every day, and it's all passive discovery. Mm-hmm. So we already got this massive database that's being, updated regularly. And then when you type a keyword, it's like literally within seconds, you will get the list. And, if you have a like big organization, you can even get like, hundreds of thousands of domains within seconds.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Are you actually doing that passively for pretty much the whole internet? So anytime a company comes on, they can instantly get like a starting point for their inventory?
Yeah. Actually, that's kind of crazy. And funny thing right now in the product, you can just do it. So you can just do it for any string, so it doesn't even have to be your company. So it's kind of like, you can use it in general OSINT. But yeah, it's all passive. That's very immediate feedback. There's some minor downside, obviously, such as you're not getting active port scanning or like internal discovery doesn't exist within that approach. So it's all external stuff. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's all instant. It's there. It's already compiled.
Well, it's a great point. How do you pivot internally and do that? Do you still have to rely on, port scanning and other things that are outside of the NetSparker product to do that internal scanning, right?
Yeah, that is correct right now. So one of the things on our roadmap is actually improving our discovery to cover internal scanning as well. And right now we have our team, when necessary, helping our enterprise customers to kick that off, help them with the onboarding and the discovery and whatnot. And it's pretty much like, as you can imagine, right? You do the port scans, you do the usual discovery stuff because, when you move to internal, unless if it's DNS related, by the way, that's something we still discover. So it can be your internal server, but you got a publicly available DNS name attached to it and somehow maybe got a certificate or something like that. We will find all of that. But if it's truly internal with no exposure to outside, then, obviously all publicly available intelligence sources is out of the window now. Like you have to stick with old school, like old scan everything.
Right.
Are there a lot of enterprises that still have internal apps that don't talk externally? Just curious.
That's funny. You're right. To be honest, more and more, recently we were working with a customer and there was this massive amount of websites that weren't reachable. And because, as you can imagine, because they were all internal, but externally identifiable and discoverable. But when you externally reach it, it's not reachable. But for them, obviously, they are within the network, they can see it. So yeah, less and less, right? All of the enterprises are moving definitely up to the cloud. And we provide on-prem, hybrid, on-cloud, private cloud deployment. So pretty much whatever you want, we deploy. And historically, we built it that way. Because when we start doing this, people were almost afraid of the cloud when it comes to security stuff. And today, even our on-prem customers says, look, I don't want to deal with this anymore. Move me to the cloud. And it's just I think what we expect is it's just taking its time. And, when I look at, for example, static source code scanners, they are still having to challenge harder than dynamic scanners because people are still quite reluctant to move their source code to the cloud. But again, we know companies doing that. And, I think we are only going to see more companies will do that as well.
So as you go out and identify these web applications, right? And I find and I get my inventory and then I start to scan them. There's always this fun, okay, I got a bajillion things to fix. How do organizations start thinking about this migration to the cloud, right? Maybe it is on-prem and they want to move it to the cloud, or if it's already in the cloud, how do you help them differentiate priorities from is it based on their migration strategy? Is it where it already lives and where the highest risk is? How do organizations deal with some of that prioritization across these different environments?
Yeah, so that's actually a huge deal. And as you said, what we have seen time and time, and to be honest, we only started to see this after we started to work with bigger customers, right? Back in the day, we started doing this in 2009. And back in the day, we used to see, okay, here's my 30 websites. And if you got a SQL injection, you just fix it. You don't discuss whether you want to fix it or not, you just fix it. If you got a cross-site scripting, again, in an ideal world, you just fix it. It might take a couple of days, whatnot, but in a third application, it's very straightforward decision. Decision is already made. It's all about action. But when we move and started to work on the enterprise, which is almost since 2015, we have been focusing heavily on the enterprise problems in web application security and building the, not just fix this, fix that, but building a program for the customer. How do you solve, not 50 application security, but how do you solve application security problem when you have thousands of them? And this is where the challenge begins, right? they have 5 people on their team. And sure, they got tons of developers, but this 5 people is the AppSec team bottleneck almost. And then they got these, let's say 1,000 scan, and now they got 10,000 issues, and they got 500 SQL injections. So now they cannot just say, let's fix this, because, they can fix all of them, and possibly that's what they want to, but it's going to take ages. And if you don't know what matters, then, it's going to be quite challenging. So when it comes to that, there are a couple of things, right? First of all, you need to know what your mission critical things are. The second thing, you need to know which vulnerabilities are even real to begin with. So if you start with something like, hey, look, okay, I've got, let's start with the most critical SQL injection. like I've got 300 of them, and I've got like 1,000 cross-site scriptings. And if my next job as an application security team is literally reviewing every single one of them, then you know it's not gonna work. It's not gonna fly. It's not gonna scale. None of that. So I think the two things, right? One thing you need to prioritize, but there's like a almost better approach, which is you need to like decentralize that. You need to scale, not the scanning already scaled, everyone scales it, but scale the process of how you deal with identified vulnerabilities. And most straightforward way of doing it is how we approach it. As I mentioned, like solving web application as a program rather than you got this problem and fix it, which can easily turn to be this 3,000 item to-do list. But instead of that, imagine a world when a vulnerability arrives, you send that vulnerability to the person who's supposed to fix it. So in a normal enterprise organization, you would see like 5-10 AppSec-oriented people, and then, up to easy 1,000 developers and so many development teams. And the fix almost always done by the development teams. But the coordination, again, is very heavily on the AppSec teams, right? I mean, while we are trying to shift left and all of that, and that's a progress, I'm going to touch that. At the end of the day, what you want to do, when the vulnerability arrives, you want to send it to the person who is going to fix it. But you can only do this if you know the vulnerability is real, which is, again, what we do is like automatically prove that the vulnerability is real. So that's, our technology proof-based scanning. So when developer gets a SQL injection, they don't only get a report that says, oh, there might be a SQL injection here. They get a report that says, there's a SQL injection in your application. And, this is your database name. This is your database user. And, maybe some more information. And this is your database version, for example. And no developer ever argue with that kind of report. So you always developer gets a report. They know, OK, there's a SQL injection. I just got to fix this. And now you kind of distributed the whole fix cycle. And at a centralized level, now as an AppSec team, now you got the visibility and you get to build stuff like SLAs to say, hey, these are the problems that's been sent and need to be fixed. And if it's not fixed, then you react. If it's already fixed, there is an automated retest process. So it just works. So you just, as an AppSec team, you build a program and your organization works with that program. And all that happens within the workflow of developers or network admins or whomever is supposed to fix that particular vulnerability. They get a ticket on their Jira. They don't need to log in anywhere else. They don't need to do anything else. They just go on with their day as usual, but instead of a bug ticket, instead of a feature ticket, they got a security ticket that says, hey, here's the problem, here's the details.
Ferruh, in our own environment, it's pretty easy to know who's responsible to fix it, right? It's either me or it's Marcin that are going to work on fixing whatever's wrong with all of our, web properties and applications, right? And when you get into larger organizations, they've got, as you said, multiple teams, thousands of developers. How are organizations creating that mapping of application to development team and managing that? Is that in NetSparker? Is that in Jira? Is there other software? And how is that tied together?
Right. I mean, NetSparker, we do give them tools to do that. But at the end of the day, it's a very organizational challenge. If the person who's using NetSparker don't know who's supposed to take care of this application, then, all the tools that we are giving to the person is not going to help. But right. NetSparker got this concept of ownership, responsibility, technical contact, etc. And all of your workflow can work around that. So you can say, this vulnerability escalated to this person, this vulnerability goes to this group, and this integrations, PagerDuty, ServiceNow, etc. So you got like that workflow with filters and all of that. And relatively, you can say, send this ticket to the technical owner or the individual developer who made the commit when SDLC integration is enabled. But at the end of the day, you're right. Like you still need to know which development team or individual or a group still owns the responsibility to address that.
Right. And that's still something you just have to build that in your organization, right?
And that's one of the things I think, in organizations, what I generally, if they haven't started to do this, and so many of them haven't, or they're very early on in their journey, before building up your web security program, or today, what you should be thinking about, hey, am I keeping track of who is responsible of what? Am I keeping track of all the assets that we are launching? And that's never going to be enough. Your policy is never going to cover 100%. So you will still do your discovery. You will still do your stuff like, I don't know who owns this today, but let me find it. But if you start it today, your life will be easier when you truly scale your web application security program or build it. Because this is one of those things, it takes an organization to move. And it's not something, hey, we brought a tool and fixed it. It's just part of the game, but you got to start that game on your end as early as possible. So when you actually start having a more mature program, you already got a good understanding, and your newly launched assets like websites across the globe is actually going through a policy process and registering their applications rather than you constantly finding it forever.
Yeah, there needs to be a central repository, and that also needs to include applications you may not develop internally, right? I'm sure there's also use cases, right, that funnel into an operations team of some kind because you're running WordPress or some other off-the-shelf software that maybe isn't even open source, right? And NetSparker's found it. I've been in this position, right? NetSparker finds a vulnerability. Either you're running an older version or NetSparker found a 0-day. I'm sure both things happen, and it's not a developer that needs to fix it. It has to go to an operations team to go follow up with the vendor. And do companies define that workflow after they've done this discovery?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Actually, that's one of the reasons why Dust is such a key piece of security, because if you think about, again, you should be shifting left, you should be securing your application from the get-go. Mm-hmm. But like whatever you do in your source code, you can be 100% secure and still get hacked. Yeah. Pretty much like your dependencies as well as off-the-shelf products on your, infrastructure. Mm-hmm. So that's absolutely the way the companies approach this. So they put all their production off-the-shelf, legacy, internal applications on NetSparker, and when they look at NetSparker, they're like, hey, this is my organization's web security's real state, because we also get to prove the vulnerability is real or not. So like at a given time, they can log into their dashboard and say, oh, I know these assets are vulnerable and can be hacked right now with 100% certainty. And that's a lot of, that means a lot, because it just changes the way you look at your web application security, because you got true visibility of it, rather than I've got all these numbers and some percentage of that might be, important, but you kind of don't really know and just guessing.
Do you find that enterprises are looking for ways to implement some kind of virtual fix or some other remediation other than fixing the code because their developers are busy, NetSparker's found all these bugs, and they're like, this is a critical application, I need something in the meantime? Do you find them doing that and being effective as well?
So yeah, I mean, definitely a lot of organizations trying to, shorten the, close that window of attack, right? So the time to you discover a vulnerability exists and time to close that, and in between someone can hack you. So a lot of organizations try to do that. It's kind of hard to do for various reasons, but one of the obvious ways that we solve in NetSparker is because we can prove a vulnerability is real, now we automatically integrate with web application firewalls and kind of hot patch the vulnerability.
Right.
So it gives you enough time to go back and development and fix it. But again, you cannot do this if you are getting false positives, because if you are getting false positives, then you might be just blocking legitimate traffic on your web application firewall. So that's definitely trends happening in that, in addition to being agile and React does quite well, especially if it's a legacy application that you don't have the source code, or, whether you are waiting for a vendor fix or vendor fix is there, but you cannot just update because it's going to break half of your stuff, then web application firewall integration and doing it automatically is actually critical.
Matt, sorry, did you have a comment in there too?
Oh, I want some guidance, right? Let's say I'm a large organization. I haven't done this. Now, that may not exist, right? Do I start with going out to try to discover everything and try to get that initial inventory first, and then kind of retrofit back ownership? Or do I go to DevOps into the pipeline and try to integrate NetSparker into the process so that as new stuff comes out, it's getting tagged right. Where do you start? Or do you start at both ends and try to work towards the middle? I'm like, how do people approach this?
Right. I mean, there are like many ways people are approaching this, but what we discover is the right way to approach is kind of, first of all, you gotta fight the fires, right? In organization today, and I can't this must be 90% applicable to the organizations in the wild. So their situation is they are getting hacked right and left. And when I say hacked, sometimes they truly get hacked with small breaches and stuff. They don't notice, or it's a small breach, so don't make the news. Or they are getting so many vulnerabilities reported from their, vulnerability bug bounty programs, or they just don't even know what's happening. So in that, and that's that's majority of the organizations are like that on the small scale, right? So on the small websites, etc., not on the mission critical websites. So their approach today is mostly, okay, let me focus on my mission critical websites, meaning SAST, DUST, pen test, security source code audits, whatever they can do. They generally at a good level on that, or trying to be good at that, but still not a program, but more like a process. But it kind of works, despite of making them sometimes slower. So that's your mission critical websites, and everyone got a good grasp on their mission critical websites. They know what makes them as a company. If you talk about Google.com is mission critical, and they know another 50, 100 websites is their mission critical core websites. But once you get outside of that, which is coming to your question, then you need to discover everything. And how do you even start? You need to. Do you start from the source code? What we discovered as the best practice, first of all, you got to fight the fire. So you got applications out there which might be vulnerable or get hacked right now. So there are long-term good implementations like shifting left, but do you have 6 to 12 months? And do you accept that 6 to 12 months staying vulnerable while you are building this perfect world for yourself? And in the future, you might be introducing zero vulnerabilities because you are getting security trainings, you are implementing tools on your, SDLC, etc. So no, that's the answer. And 6 to 12 months is being reasonable if you are trying to implement this to hundreds of, pipelines and dev teams. So what we recommend and what we have observed, okay, look, first of all, get a discovery. Give you the assets that you already know, so your mission critical whatnot, your discovery, so the new website. So whatever we put in, let's put in and let's scan first. And because we know what is real, what is not, we can immediately get a good picture of what is your current situation. So do you actually have tons of critical vulnerabilities in many of your websites and you don't even know you are sleeping on them, or they are actually getting hacked, you're not even aware? First, you got to start fixing that stuff. And once you do that, now you got a very good understanding which one of your assets needs closer attention, because you can say, hey, look, these 50 websites, which actually turns out developed by the same dev group, clearly got a problem. They keep introducing vulnerabilities. They don't even have the basic, security understanding. So, okay, let's, first fix this. Let's get them security training, right? Let's now start shifting left on that, because that's very maybe not mission critical, but very important, or maybe mission critical. Let's definitely start building a program around it on the SDLC because they need it. But so what this gives you, you get quick value out of your new web security program. You don't have to wait years or months or anything like that. It's very quick value. And then as you are maturing up, you know where to focus, where to start, shifting your left process. And also you start integrating everything, discover responsible parties. So it's a journey, but we believe you got to start from where the vulnerability is, rather than, okay, let me stop introducing vulnerability in 6 months kind of approach, which is a very different way. And you can even do the same with SaaS. If you look at SaaS implementation, it's a similar journey. You don't just say, okay, let me do all the integration. First of all, you say, okay, let me just scan this. Let me scan the source code and what I have. Then I need to configure, get it to the right place, and then I can only then, when everything works, integrate into SDLC, because obviously in the SaaS, you got another big challenge, which is like false positives, kind of problematic from automation point of view. So it requires a lot of double checking, but it's just the nature of it. But to sum it up, you start from that, like where the vulnerability is, where the danger is, which is your production, which is your external exposed, even on the internal, but which is actually deployed up and running applications. And once you get that picture, now you know how to move shift left, where to focus, which websites responsible parties needs to be prioritized, so you can go around the organization and say, who own this, who own that, like you guys gotta fix this, instead of just saying, hey, here's my 3,000 website, let me start from any random order,
right.
which definitely not a efficient way to get to that value. And keep in mind one last topic on this. In an enterprise organization, one of the big challenges of the AppSec teams, they got to justify their investments and time. And if they are just spinning for 12 months and cannot go up and say, hey, I made our security 20% better, 50% better, 30% better, then they're not going to get anywhere. They're not going to get invested as people or as in tools or like whatever they need, or they are going to get any further time because they will ask the simple question, hey, you had 12 months, you got no proper measurable improvements across our organization, because, the reality is they had progress, but the value hasn't been created yet. So being very late to reach that value is very problematic for like AppSec leaders, general security leaders, and, individual executioners of these programs.
Yeah, it's true. And I think that by focusing on what's most important to the business, where the bodies are buried if you've worked for the organization for any lengthy amount of time, starting there, fixing some problems shows value and also builds confidence in the teams. And I think when you say shifting left, what I found, Ferruh, and I'm curious to see if you found this too in your customers, is in doing a CI/CD pipeline, implementing DevOps, doing the shift left. One of the things that I've seen very successful organizations do is really restructure their teams and breaking down silos, a page out of the Unicorn project, right? And creating teams that have developers, that have reliability engineers and test people. I don't even think we call them QA anymore. They're really developers that are writing tests, right? It's got a security person on the team, and it's got an operations person on the team. And they're no longer living in 4 or 5 different departments and they're all pointing fingers at each other going, it's your problem, right? Now there's one functional team that's responsible for an application or a piece of a larger application. Those are the people that get the tickets, and they can operate in an awesome manner because they can write code, they can test code, they can have security, and they can deploy it all as one functional team. Do you find organizations moving there? And that's, of course, I think a slower journey, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think we understand certain best practices today as the application security world and software development world. And to your comment, actually, we as an organization on software development pretty much moved to the same methodology. Having these
that's
like
awesome.
one team, kind of self-sufficient.
Mm-hmm.
However, when it comes to app security, I think there are 2 parts of the game. One is having that group, having the right dynamic, having the right training and right AppSec people and the resources within the teams. That's definitely the long-term goal. And as you said, it's something everyone is moving, but it's a very slow progress. And it's also limited impact because you cannot do that for every single development team pretty much. I mean, at least I haven't seen that successfully happen.
Right.
Now, the second part of that problem is consistency. And again, we talk about decentralization, but also there's a centralization piece of it. So in our organization, in many enterprises, when we talk with our customers, and generally they are the AppSec teams, and we got individual software development teams using our product. Mm-hmm. But on the enterprise adoption, the centralized AppSec teams utilize our product because what they do, they build a web security program for the organization, not just for one dev team. Mm-hmm. And that's where consistency and best practice comes in. And what they tell us, hey, look, all these development teams begging us to give them the right tools and the integration so they can do the best practice on app security. Mm-hmm. But they don't get to do that internally, or even when they do, they kind of fail and you lost the visibility as an organization. Now you got individually inconsistent execution across the board. So what you want to do, you want this centralized group building the best practice, integrations, tools, APIs, whatnot, and providing, when I say build, like this is buy, build, integrate, configure kind of model. Yep. And then giving them to these teams so they can utilize it. But to be honest with you, shifting left, having that kind of team groups, whatnot, all of these are kind of the nirvana of app security. And the reality is nothing close to that. Like the reality is everyone is fighting fires, trying to not be breached yet another day. And all of this is kind of, the great example would be if like building those teams, having a proper, progress, integration, whatnot is like running in AppSec, like majority of the organizations are crawling. So you cannot just go crawling to running. Mm-hmm. You gotta walk first. And that's where this comes in. You gotta like walk, which is like find your vulnerabilities, find where you are, then start integrating, then build your program to give them the options to integrate and train them, evangelize them internally, because you cannot genuinely cannot enforce this in many organizations. But once that's done, and it's an adoptable, reasonable process with like the approach that we take in NetSpark, integrate with all the SDLC, don't send false positives, so you earn developers' respect and trust. And if you can do that, then you're gonna reach that maturity level. So you were crawling, now you are walking, and you are building towards a world that you will be running. But if you're doing any statistical thing, I bet my money on maybe 2% of enterprises are running today. So 98% is barely walking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the consistency, I think, is a great point, right? And I think it's a challenge for the security teams to build frameworks and develop policies that can go across all of the functional development teams, because you likely have some teams that are making stuff work and doing a great job, and then other teams that are struggling and have to do things a slightly different way, and the outcome is different. And then you put that across dozens of different teams, and you run into this consistency issue when you've got those highly functional, cross-functional teams, I should say, that maybe end up with different models, and now you can create a mess.
Oh, definitely. And it kind of reminds me, back in the day when I was pen testing, I ended up explaining customers multiple times why we missed that vulnerability last time around as the same pen testing company. The reality is because, I don't know, maybe I was doing the test, but I missed that because, pen test is not necessarily scientific at many levels. Mm-hmm. Or maybe the other person was just worse than me because, it's just all human driven. And you can be on a good day, you can be on a bad day. But like that kind of shows like the consistency in security, unless you got the automation and flow or not, is like extremely hard to achieve. Because now all you have good security on an AppSec team is how good one person that you hired there, which brings the even bigger problem. Like how do you even hire app security people? They don't exist almost. Like they're just like such a low amount of high quality AppSec people out there. Even the biggest organizations are having massive trouble hiring AppSec people. And honestly, if anyone is getting into security, like this is such a wide open space right now, and you should be just doing this.
Yeah, because when we talk AppSec, that could be an app that's written in C++, right? Or it could be a mobile app. And those are two wildly different skill sets, especially when we talk about how do you apply the security, of those different applications.
Absolutely. I mean, to be honest, when I talk about app, like 99% of the time, I mean web applications. And it can be written in various languages, but the web application dynamics and vulnerabilities are very similar to each other across the languages, while you got obviously use specific things to languages and frameworks. So as you said, when you are on mobile or native or web, you completely get a different set of security problems. And like I for myself, like if you were to ask me, about mobile security, I don't know. Like I don't know so much about it. I cannot even explain. So like web application security, on the other hand, is like its own niche. I wouldn't say niche today, but like its own thing. And I think many similar things to many things in security, right? Like I've been doing security for almost like 19 years now. And if you were to ask me about crypto, hey, look, I know the basics, but that's the extent of it. In all those years, no, I didn't get into crypto as like a security expert because it's its own thing.
Yeah, and you're going to find that across your cross-functional teams too. They're all going to have different challenges in different areas of expertise and have different gaps. And applying security across those is extremely challenging. But I think is really where we're headed as an industry is that security role being spread out a little bit, but also still trying to maintain that central. We define the policy. We work with developers to say what breaks a build, what doesn't, but the security team still needs to manage the policies, manage the secrets, right, and things of that nature.
It's also guidance issue. Like, I mean, if we were to assume every single software dev team knows the best practice in application security, I mean, we are assuming just way too much. You need the guidance and that best practice. So in a common organization, your key people who can strategize at that level are sitting on that centralized groups. And like one thing we very much specialize that actually working with those key groups and key managers like director of security or sometimes up to C. So if it's a little bit smaller organization or even in the big organizations, and give them the guidance, hey, this is the best practice of web security, which is a good chunk of it is on us, but a good chunk of it is also off our product. But we still give them the guidance, hey, this is what you should be building. And we know this because, we actually got like 3,500 customers or something dealing with the same challenge. And not every single one of them at this scale, but this is what we specialize, over many years and over a decade now. So, but if you expect that guidance or understanding, which you can barely even find at director level, if you expect that in individual software development teams, individual contributors, I mean, that's not going to be there. It's just not going to be there. So you will get a lot of wrong implementation, wrong approaches, and you will see developers are not really trusting the security teams, even when it's one of their team members, because the tool set, the approach, the relation, the best practice implementation is not there.
All the more reason why I need a good DAST. And for folks that want to learn more, you can find more and get a trial at securityweekly.com/NetSparker. Ferruh, thank you very much for coming on this edition of Enterprise Security Weekly.
Thanks a lot, Paul.
With that, we'll take a short break and come back with our final interview for the show. Stay tuned.